You'll see that big spike at 98, and you see the equivalent almost spike at 2016-17. Temperatures have dropped considerably since that spike in 16-17. But regardless, we should have seen the snows, but we didn't.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
That needs to really be brought out in these kind of, discussions here. And again, another one, New Mexico. Record rains and snows throughout the entire season. They have more than doubled their entire rainfall for an entire season ever recorded, more than doubled. So this comes right in there. It's in the same general vicinity continentally as Colorado. It's right in the same area. So is the Four Corners area. So Nevada, doubling the snow and precipitation records. It's almost 3x up for Nevada. And then we come over to Arizona. We see the same thing, all-time record snows, Flagstaff, You can go on for days there on the record snows this year. But again, their precipitation almost tripling the norm. Now, this is the second year in a row it's been happening in this vicinity here from Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico area. Will we see it a third year in a row? And if we do, that is a new pattern emerging. So if you're thinking about areas to move to, that you're thinking, hey, it's going to still be warm down there in the desert, and we could probably grow crops, and it might be a little bit different environment down there with much more rainfall, obviously a lot more is going to grow there. Because I'm looking at these pictures of the desert out here in New Mexico, and it looks like a lush field to me. It doesn't look anything scrappy and deserty like I'm used to seeing. And I'm thinking New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Nevada is like this barren wasteland desert. Scorpions cruising around, rattlesnakes over there. But what I'm seeing now is just verdant, lush, incredibly lush greenery as far as the eye can see in these images. Grasses, shrub, bushes, incredible beauty from nature. Multiple all-time cold record temperatures fell in southern Queensland. Okay, southern Queensland, I'm considering that subtropical, pretty warm. They got palmetto trees there. A lot of holiday beaches. Queensland. Travel to Queensland in Australia. It's got the beaches, got the barbecues, super nice climate, but record cold temperatures this year. And remember, as we head into summer in the Northern Hemisphere, they're heading into winter. So their record cold temperatures, some of these temperatures wouldn't be seen until the middle of their winter, which would be, July, August. So here's another bigger eruption as well. Remember hearing about Mount Agung, and you heard about that erupting and all the tourists fled, and then you didn't hear about it in the news since, pretty much. Here, Mount Agung, Nettie, already ranking in it as a VEI 3 with a new eruption up to 30,000 plus feet. So we got, again, coming back to the silica-rich. Now, what are the odds that two silica-rich magma chambers bang off with these VEI 3-4 eruptions in the same week? One in Mexico, and now the second one in Indonesia. So they're putting the rank in here as a VEI 3. Now Tambora, the thing that caused a year without a summer, was a VEI 7.5. Not quite an 8, but more than a 7.
And speaking of cycles, my new book with my co-author Bill Porter, Climate Revolution, a must-read for understanding our sun-driven climate. As we progress deeper into this new Eddy Grand Solar Minimum, weather extremes leading to global food scarcity and higher food prices are here now. This book describes the expected changes, how to survive and thrive during future challenging times, and also practical preparations The entire book is interactive with over 250 links, so you can click and go out to the scientific aspect of what we're talking about with the repeating cycles in this grand solar minimum. The science is explained so you understand the mechanisms. The solutions are there because we know we're going to face these exact same problems again that were faced in the Maunder minimum, the Sporer minimum, the Wolf minimum. Find designs for building greenhouses, grow guides, beam soil techniques, as well as bioreactors to create your own growth hormones for the soil. Available now, the new Adapt 2030 Climate Revolution. The link's in the description box below.
And as I've said repeatedly through the show, and I'll say it again because I believe it's that important. If you see in the news that there's been a VEI 7 eruption, and I don't care where it is on the planet, if you see anything in the news VEI 7, you need to stop what you're doing at that second. And I don't care if you're going into a meeting or if you have something to do at the office or you got the kids to pick up at school, you go pick them up early and you tell them it's a family emergency, because it is at that point. You need to get out to the store and buy everything you can that's storable for long-term food storage. If we experience a VEI 7, with today's already tumultuous growing conditions, by next year there'll be a global famine, no doubt about it. There'll be people eating each other by the end of the following year of a VEI 7. There'll be cannibalism on our planet. That's how bad and how fast it'll go. There'll be no warning. There'll be very little time to prepare. And it'll take about less than a week before everybody in the news starts to talk about what happened in the Tambora eruption with the same equivalent ferocity, if you will. And then it'll take about a day or two for people to put two and two together like, oh no, our food prices already rose. We had horrible growing conditions throughout the planet this year. And now all this ash that's going to go up there and block the sun for 2 years is probably going to make our growing even worse. Maybe I should go to the store and buy some stuff too. And there'll probably be a line out the door waiting to even get in the store. And then those stores are going to quickly run out of food. And then the problems are going to start. So if you see a VEI 7, and if you hear of ash pushing at 120,000 feet and above, you stop what you're doing and you get out and you buy anything you can. Because these silica-rich chambers are starting to go off here. Australian polar blast continues, all-time record snows in so many places. And I encourage you to take a look at what's happening in Australia too. Not only with the drought and the loss of crops, and now they're a food importer, they're a wheat importer and they used to export. Okay, that's fine. But truly dig into what's happening with their climate down there. Like everything is all-time record whatever as we move into this winter season with them. It's incredible. What was forecast for Australia was it's supposed to get hotter, but now it's the complete opposite, and same with New Zealand. They've broken every record ever set for cold already in both places, and snow, and the winter hasn't even started officially yet. And then Al Gore, so aproposly, is there to talk about climate change mitigation because of a heating world, yet he arrives in the coldest conditions recorded in the country. I want to bring you over to India, too, because this is another indicator. The Himalayan mountains, fresh snow in Himachal Pradesh in India, closing all the roads nobody's ready for, the snow. It's summertime. Midsummer snow in Kashmir. Heavy snow in the Arctic Circle. Summer in Russia, heavy snow. What is it? What's going on here? You can't tell me that we're all out here forecasting all these exact changes to happen as we dip into this grand solar minimum, and they're all happening now, yet they're still talking about CO2, not even giving it any time in the media to talk about possibly what's going to happen next year and where our food is. Why don't we start talking about solutions? I am still baffled. The only thing I can possibly think is they're trying to get the greatest loss of life possible and bring us down to within a couple 100 million people. That is the only thing actually is on my radar at the moment. So you're on your own. So when I say you go out to the store and buy as much as you can, some people might think that's selfish. Well, you know what? You're on your own. Nobody's ever going to warn you. So why wouldn't you be selfish for self-survival during the time? If we would have come together globally and said, all right, everybody's going to need to grow gardens and we're all going to have to help each other, and that'd be awesome. Now, at that point, I would be like, we're trying to get through it together. Maybe don't hoard as much. Don't go out and buy as much. We're all trying to still get through it together as a unified globe. But with zero warning, you're completely on your own. You have to do what you can to survive through this. Nobody's going to help you. You're going to have to even start your own communities because the governments aren't doing it for you. So if you see massive eruption, you're going to be on your own completely. You think anybody's going to whisk right in and knock on your front door and give you food because we're not growing any because of the following year's crop wipeouts after a huge eruption if it were to occur? Nope. You're on your own. Completely. Unequivocally. Without a shadow of a doubt. On your own. My causation is they're trying to depopulate the planet by not allowing us to get ready, because then they could say, well, we didn't put you up against a wall. It wasn't us. We're not culpable. There's nothing we did. We didn't do anything. We thought the science was settled, but again, in history, every time we learn something, it's proved wrong. Yeah. And they're going to milk that excuse. The reason I brought that earlier in the program is because they're going to use that excuse. Oh, we thought we knew the science, but it was different. The sun was different this time. It caught us off guard. Oh, it wasn't our fault. We didn't know. Only those guys on YouTube knew. But we tried to deplatform them and remove the channels because we thought they were stark raving lunatics. But I watch in the future, and I'm saying, again, take a note today and say, note to self in the future. How are they going to explain the massive loss of life through this event? Wait a minute, you didn't know. You told us for the last 30 years that everything was going to be fine. It was going to get warmer. It was going to get hotter. Crops grow better with more CO2 and warm conditions. By the way, it's plant food. But you didn't tell us that. So these signals here of fresh snowfall in Himachal Pradesh and the summer snows in Kashmir, okay, I understand it's the Himalaya. But it's not the top of the Himalaya. I've actually been to these two places before. They're at about 6,000 feet. The news media will come out and go, oh, snow in the Himalaya. And you'll be like, oh, okay, snow in the Himalaya, Mount Everest. Okay, it could snow up there at 29,000 feet. Cool, no problem. It's snow in the Himalaya. And that's the way they're trying to portray it in these news stories. It's not snow in the Himalaya. It is snow at 6,000 feet going into summer in areas that have pine trees growing because they're at 6,000 feet in their resort towns in Shimla, for example, that a lot of people go to escape the heat from New Delhi during the summer. They go up to 6,000 feet and it's cooler up there. This is not the top of the Himalaya like they're trying to portray it in the media. And when I see these pictures in Kashmir, they're those super big giant flakes covering all the pine trees, covering all the ground where you can't see any ground. Everything is white in the picture. Rooftops are white. Houses are white on the roofs. The entire landscape is white, and all the pine trees are covered in white. It looks like it could be, a mid-November snow, a December snow. It's actually that deep. And then I'll come up to the Arctic Circle snow here. This comes off Sputnik. Got 5 inches of snow coming down. The city called Salankhard and Labinth Nangi, Russia. And then there's a whole bunch of other areas on the periphery there that didn't get as much snow, but they're still coming down enough to cover roofs. Malaysia, 5 meters of rain in some places. This comes off the Straits Time. You got to realize 5 meters, how much is that? It's 15 feet. Now, I don't know if they're talking about the creeks swelling to that much or actually that much came out of the atmosphere. But if it is, that's an atmospheric compression event sandwiched right over the tropical zones. And you look back in history and you start to take a look at the drought. So they've reconstructed the drought. Quite a nice extent here. So if you go back, you can take a look at where the droughts were in Asia in the 1640s. And then they brought it up to like 1720. And there was some like 1810. They did a whole bunch of drought reconstructions or precipitation reconstructions for Indonesia and then just greater Southeast Asia, creeping up into southern China. Now, the intertropical convergence zone moves through there. That's kind of the base point where, like right now, it's as far south as the ITCZ can go. But from this point forward, it's going to start creeping more northward. So obviously, you would expect something like this, like incredible floods as these rivers in our skies, our jet streams and cloud bands, cloud cells, start to move into different positions. There's going to be collisions in the atmosphere, where 2 or 3 jet streams are going to collide until they work themselves out into a new pattern. Now, this pattern could take anywhere from 3 to 7 to 10 years to move itself into its new positions. That's after everything stops moving.
TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at trueleafmarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. trueleafmarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
Since we're in the beginning of the changes right now, you would expect a lot of these types of events to happen because we're in the beginning of the movement of all of our atmosphere into new places. Now, eventually it'll settle. So give it to about 2025 or 6, and that'll be the end point where all the new shifts will have occurred. Then from that point, it'll take about 3 to 7 years for everything to stabilize to where the rain patterns should come back to normal again. But wherever you are, if you're going into a drought, that's going to continue to get more heavy drought. If you're coming into a rain situation, you're going to get more rain indefinitely for at least the next 3 decades. Let's put it at that. This is the way this is working out here. And these heavy rains across Bulgaria, Romania, these are the main corn growing zones. Whatever was in the fields there, they're talking about half, 50% of everything that is in the fields has been wiped out. And this is over for Romania. And again, they produce 13% of all the corn in the EU. Accra, Ghana. Now, I talked about Ghana last week, but I wanted to give you a little small update. So last week, the information was sketchy. The storm had just occurred, and it was ongoing during that time. So as they were putting out the announcement, it was at the time of this radio program. So what I wanted to do was revisit this because this is a perfect example of new weather zones and weather bands and jet streams and cloud cells pushing into new directions. Now, I was unaware how intense the storm was. And they were talking about a year's worth of rain in a day. But it wasn't spread out over 24 hours as such. Like when I said a year's worth of rain, you might think, okay, well, it took them 24 hours and probably each month took about, maybe 2 hours or something like this. No, I didn't realize everything was sandwiched in pretty much about 2 hours. Now, it had started raining heavily, and it did rain. But then what is described as people almost suffocating as they were trying to run from the rain were being not only swept away and drowned, but on streets just that turned into rivers. The highways were completely inundated. The only safe areas were on a bridge, but if you were standing on the bridge, you almost suffocated because the amount of rain coming down so quickly, people were having difficulty breathing. That's how much rain came down. And the amount of people that were walking and trying to run to get out of the way that it got swept away in the floods, that's terrifying. So Accra obviously got the most publication because it was in the middle of the capital. And there's news organizations there, and there's a lot of people with cameras, and they have street cameras, people with cameras. But when you get out into the countryside, this is where they finally got to. Whole villages were washed away. There's no villages left. There's like remnants of a village. But in terms of the homes, they're gone. People are gone. There's nothing left. Floodplains actually widened out to the point where entire villages were buried in mud, where they could see some pipes still coming out and some structures from the foundation still. But otherwise, it was completely covered in mud, where if you were to look at it, you'd be like, whoa. If you didn't know there was a village there, you wouldn't have been actively looking for a village there. That's how wiped away it was and covered in mud, where they didn't even see it any longer. Trees were wiped away. Everything was wiped away. It was a massive flood. This is like an inland sea flood kind of thing. Incredible amounts of moisture coming down in the atmosphere here. These changes are real, and they're going to amplify. And the more they amplify, the more it's going to upset the balance of society. And as the balance of society gets upset, the more governments are going to want to curtail the flow of information into, just like we've seen always through history. They're only going to want their megaphone voice pieces giving the information. Because once you understand the ramifications of what we're going into with these food losses and grand solar minimum, you're going to shift your spending habits. You're probably not going to pay your taxes. So the deeper we go into the economic losses and the deeper we go into food price rises and the true state of our world, when it comes to the climate and your food prices, it's going to skyrocket. It's going to go in a different direction, especially when there's food riots that unfold. You can see there'll be a curtailing of the media here.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.